Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Eden Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Hope you guys had a wonderful weekend and that eclipse didn't treat you too badly. Today we are going to get into Venus's entrance into the sign of Cancer that happened on Sunday, yesterday, and which is also happening alongside a Sun-Uranus conjunction in Venus's sign of Taurus. So that is on the agenda today. We're going to talk about some themes to watch for. I have 5 archetypal themes that I think are pretty interesting, given the fact that Uranus is a very, very ancient original god mythologically. And we're going to look at it from the standpoint of a little bit of like ancient archetypal loving. Because this is a conjunction being hosted by Venus, and Venus is now in a very lunar, watery, sensitive, and feminine temple on her own. So that's what we're going to get into today. Now, before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss a video. Leave me some comments in the comment section how you like the content or are noticing the astrology of the moment. And you can always go to my website, lightcycleastrology.com, if you're ever interested in getting a reading from me. Okay, well, let's go ahead and pull up the real-time clock now and take a look at this conjunction in Taurus and also Venus's entrance into the sign of Cancer. Now, bear with me, guys. I am using my new recording software, StreamYard, to share screen and record this video. So I might be a little bit more clunky of the controls on the fly here, but hopefully I'll get this down after a few tries. So there we see that Venus is now at 00 and 00 minutes of the sign of Cancer this was yesterday actually that this happened, May 7th, by 10:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is the time zone I use. So I typically use East Coast time because I'm out here in Hawaii and nobody really shares too much my time zone with me. So I'm just trying to find more of a centrally located location to grab people either from Europe or India or California. It's kind of centrally located on the East Coast there. So Eastern Standard Time is the time zone that I put the chart into. So you can convert it from there, but 10:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me go ahead and put up my label too. And let's see here. There we go. So this is when Venus moved into the sign of Cancer. So now we have this changeover where Venus has entered a sign that is the domicile of the moon, right? And this is a really interesting place for Venus to enter into. For one, because it is the summer solstice point that Venus crosses into. So there was an ancient name for this point of the year that was called the Gateway of Man by the ancient astrologers. So Venus has entered this gateway now. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, what that is like. But that's a really interesting place. But more importantly, she is also, at the time that she enters this sign, hosting the Sun and Uranus in her temple of Taurus here. And by this point, the Sun is at 16 degrees, almost 17, and Uranus, a very slow-moving planet, is at 18 degrees. And so they are within that 3-degree range of engagement of a conjunction to each other. And over the next couple of days, by the time we get to Tuesday here, we're going to see that the Sun actually passes over Uranus by Tuesday, right around, let's call it 4:20 or so p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. So afternoon Tuesday, we're going to see the Sun passing over. And then what happens is, when does this move out of engagement? This moves out of engagement range by Friday now and almost on into Saturday. But we're going to see by Friday here's the Sun at 21 degrees. So there's about 3 degrees of separation now that happens between the Sun and Uranus as the Sun pulls away there. So that's really when the energy is going to calm down between this conjunction here. But it is Venus that is the host lord of these two planets coming together in the sky, which means that she is going to provide this planet resources, or these two planets resources. And that's really important because I'll give you an example of this. So let's say that the sun wants to do something solar, right? Well, he is in Venus's sign of Taurus, so he needs to do something solar in a Venusian way. That's how the sun is having to express his solar nature, is through a kind of Venusian archetype. Well, because Venus is in a whole sign sextile reception to her temple of Taurus, she is able to provide any planets traveling through her temple resources. So, for instance, let's say that the sun wants to do something solar, and Venus can say, well, I see you, sun. I have visibility back to you. I see what you're wanting and what you need. So let me call up some old friends, maybe some family members, and let's have a party. And the sun says, great, I get to be the center of attention at a party. That's solar. That's perfect. That'll work. Right. So that's how reception works when a planet can see back to its own temple. If it's not traveling through one of its own temples, if it has whole sign reception back to its temple. So if it has whole sign sextile, square, trine, or opposition reception back to one of its domiciles, and planets are traveling through that domicile, it is going to provide those planets and that domicile with resources, because it can see those planets, and so it sort of knows what they want, what they're requesting. This is just the way that ancient astrologers came up with a description, or kind of an understandable way that would show you how planets are relating to each other as they are moving through the zodiac in different places to one another, right? So that's just the ancient way that they did it. So what is it like when, let's say, Venus didn't have whole sign reception back to Taurus? Let's say Venus was in the sign of Aries, right? Aries is the neighboring sign of Taurus, and neighbor signs don't see each other. It was almost described in ancient astrology like somebody is kind of out of your peripheral vision, maybe just a little bit behind you, and they're just too close and you can't see them. So let's say that Venus is in the sign of Aries. The way that it would work, for instance, let's say the sun wants to do something solar again, and he's looking around for some social situation to get into. He wants to have a party. He still has to filter his social expression through a Venusian kind of lens. But this time it just doesn't work out, because he's at Venus's home alone. Venus isn't, he can't reach her on the phone. He can't get her on, Facebook or whatever it is. He's just out of, the internet is down or whatever. The phones are down. There's no reception. So if the sun tries to do something solar and he has to do it in this Venusian way, he might try to do it, but it's just that it isn't going to work out. The outcome of such an effort tends to not work out quite so well, because there just isn't the resources there to do it. So for instance, maybe nobody's available to have a party. He calls up everybody he knows and people are busy. So this is just kind of a metaphorical way, or a symbolic way of seeing how planets relate to each other as they move through the zodiac. So that is one thing that is really interesting that we also see. Also, Venus doesn't have bad dignity, right, in the sign of Cancer. So one way which the ancient astrologers categorized how planets would fare in different places in the zodiac, they called it dignity. And it's just like it sounds. If you have good dignity, things tend to be advantageous or work out well for you, because it's like, you're kind of important you're an important member of the group or whatever. So Venus doesn't have poor or extra good dignity in Cancer. I guess by triplicity she does, but in any case, she's not like, say, for instance, Venus were in Virgo, where she is depressed. In this case, Virgo also has reception back to her temple of Taurus by whole sign trine. Going back to this party analogy, the sun wants to do something solar. Venus says, how about a party? But in this case, Venus being depressed, she might get together a bunch of really dry, like academics, and it's like one of those dinner parties with accountants or something. And the sun is like, Yeah, I don't know anything about accounting, and this is really dry. And these people don't respond well to me trying to be this, center of attention kind of a person. They're just too intellectual and it's just awkward. So you still see how there is the party going on, but Venus is sort of depressed. So she's going to provide depressing resources back to her temple of Taurus in this example, right? So that's a little bit about dignity and a little bit about reception here that is going on, just to provide some context for this. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the archetypal themes to watch for, given the fact that all of these things are going on. So, theme number one is going to be uh, the nostalgic past. This is really a theme that we see for Venus as a standalone theme, being in the sign of Cancer, right? But the moon is related to family, home, nurturance, comfort, and also things of the past, like ancestry or old friends or old times. The moon has this connection with things that are karmically linked to our past or our past experiences. So in a sense, you might say that the moon, one of the key words for the moon could be remembrance. The moon tends to cycle back, and it's cycling all the time back. So there is this quality of remembrance with Cancer as a sign being the temple of the moon. So one thing that you could definitely see is as Venus is traveling through the moon's temple, you get the sense that there is this romantic quality that Venus is filtering, um, and she's remembering the past. So she might be remembering all sorts of things that bring joy or pleasure or friendship, like old times, just those nostalgic memories of like, oh, I remember when I was a kid. And, it's kind of springtime. Like I'm actually already starting to feel this already. I don't know what it is about summer and spring. Maybe it's that we get, school off in the summer or whatever for a couple of months. But I remember as a kid, those 2 months of summer seemed like a whole year from my age. It seemed like that just lasted forever. And there were those, just really nostalgic memories of smelling different things, barbecues and running around in the grass. And every time we turn into springtime or when spring is close to summer, I always get this nostalgic feeling for my childhood, but my childhood specifically in the summertime. So you get those old times with friends, maybe some foods that you used to really like as a child or in the past, old friends, old family, maybe old relationships. That of course could be a Venus in Cancer kind of a thing. So that's theme number one, is just that kind of nostalgia, that romantic remembrance of all things that you loved or experiences that brought you pleasure or joy or comfort of the past, right? That's going to be theme number one. Okay, so theme number two is going to be this idea that this point, as every year when the sun crosses the boundary between the end of Gemini and the beginning of Cancer, that is the point in the sky where the sun travels annually to its highest declination. So, in other words, the pathway across from morning across to the zenith and the sun setting. If you could see that line of path as the sun rises every morning and then goes overhead and then eventually starts to sink down and head towards the western horizon, that pathway, that is rising day by day once we passed the vernal equinox, right? So we passed the vernal equinox, and that arc rises and rises and rises, and it rises up to its highest point in the sky by the time the sun enters Cancer, that point right there. So that was called the gateway of man by the ancient astrologers, because what happens from that point forward is that the sun's pathway or the arc begins to come back down. So from the standpoint of metaphysics, you could say that the sun representing spirit or God or oneness or any number of metaphysical solar kinds of qualities that have to do with light and spirit. that was seen to begin to head back towards the Earth. And of course, the Earth was within the moon's sublunary sphere, they used to call it. So they imagined that, the moon traveling around the Earth, everything within the moon's circumference was the sublunary sphere that was seen to be like within the domicile of the world. And the world, of course, and the moon has this connection to material form. So one thing that, as a metaphysical concept, they imagined was that spirit enters form, or it's beginning to come back down into form. So one way you could see this is um, this notion that you have some spirited idea. There's a welling up of something that you visualize, like an image within you, and it hasn't taken shape yet. But because of this metaphorical descent of the sun within the sign of Cancer, the symbolism is that spirit takes on flesh. It takes a form. It moves into the sublunary realm where it can take on a physical, tangible kind of form. So it doesn't remain just an idea or an inspiration or a goal or an aspiration or something like that, right? It takes on something. So one way we could interpret Venus moving into the sign of Cancer is that if there is a Venusian archetypal ideal, for instance, I want to find a partner, I want love. This could be the time where we see that ideal taking on form. It could become manifest in the world. Now, one thing that happens though is that as ideas become flesh, as certain things, as spirit takes on flesh and becomes physical, it is then subject to the laws of nature, of karma, of cause and effect. So as soon as something becomes manifest in the world, it's subject to any number of things that are, you could say, are just involved in the field of karma or cause and effect. So that is part and parcel for the sign of Cancer, things being tangible, being material. So Cancer has this connection to material things, material comforts, the body, the home, the things that we desire. So we're going to see any number of desires that basically take on flesh, but they are also subject to the laws of nature, as it were. So that's one thing you could see. So, just examples of this again are like an ideal of love, an ideal of pleasure. I want to become a chef. I want to find love. I want to reconnect with family or old friends. Those nostalgic things of the past, I want to do those again. We're going to actually, clean up the backyard patio and have a party and, stuff like that. So that's theme number 2. Okay, so theme number 3 is going to be surrounding yourself with what you like and bringing spring beauty inside. Now, this almost could sound trite if I weren't going to explain this a little bit, but surrounding yourself with what you like. Most of the time we do that anyway, right? So there's the potential to have something be sounding trite. But what I mean by that is this is a time where that usual or ordinary propensity to surround ourselves with something that we love or we like or that is pleasurable, that usual propensity, it's just that becomes more the center theme of the moment because the archetype is just somehow standing out more. So, of course, we always want to surround ourselves with things that we like, but this is going to be where it becomes emphasized, or there's like an exclamation point for that particular thing. And that's just because Venus is in the moon's temple. So this is, at the store, you're like, oh, like, what's that store that always gets me? Is it TJ Maxx? I think it's TJ Maxx, man. Every time I go into that store, and we don't have a lot of stores here in Hawaii where I live. Like, there's just very few stores that have this kind of, beauty and aesthetic artistic quality like TJ Maxx. But every time I'm in that store, I want to buy everything I see. I'm always like, oh, this would be great at home. So definitely, like, this is going to be a time where I have to be careful not to go into TJ Maxx, right? Because I'm going to want to buy everything and stick it in my home, because I've always really liked kind of artistic things at home, especially if they're somehow like kind of spiritual or mystical. That's really where the glitter of mysticism captures my imagination, and then out comes the wallet, and that's not good. So surrounding yourself with what you want. But this could also be a time where, we're in the midst of springtime now, the sun in the sign of Taurus, the middle of spring, and it's quite beautiful. The flowers are blooming. There's that spring magic in the air. So this definitely could be simply a time where you want to bring that springtime beauty inside your home, but also inside your soul. So that's theme number 3. Okay, now let's go on to theme number 4 is going to be beautification of the body, body art, tattoos, piercings, diets, makeovers, exercise, bright springtime hair colors, etc. So especially with now we get into a little bit more of the Sun conjunct Uranus mix with Venus in Cancer. So especially now, if we pull into the mix this Sun-Uranus conjunction that is happening in Venus's temple, we could see almost like a radical way of beautifying the body. But Venus is traveling through the moon's temple, and the moon relates to the body. So could this be a time where we are really interested in things like body art, getting tattoos or piercings? But these would be things that, as the Sun and Uranus form that conjunction, that might be a little bit outside of what we would typically normally be attracted to. So it might be a little bit radical. Like you might be a person that never thought of getting tattoos, and all of a sudden it's just really intriguing to you right now. Or one thing that you see right now, over the last, I guess, 7-8 years or so, people dyeing their hair these really bright colors. Now, in my generation, which I hope I don't date myself too much here, but in my generation, Generation X, I remember as a teenager that only punk rockers would dye their hair these really bright greens and blues and things like that. But now, you see people who are like, my grandmother's age with these colors. So that's a societal shift, but this could definitely be a time, I think, where it's like you want to look bright, you want to look springtimey, So I could definitely see people really being attracted to and having their hair done in these really bright springtime colors. But also this could be a time where beautifying the body through a series of, healthy ways, like, taking a sudden adherence to diets or makeovers or exercise regimens in order to bring beauty back to the body. So that's definitely, I think, within the theme of this time right now. So now the last theme is going to be ancient archetypal loving. And of course, that is what the video is titled. And this is my favorite of the 5 themes, because this is really where we get into the thick of the Uranian archetype. So I don't know if you guys have been watching the channel lately, you might have noticed that I have been toying around with different ways of interpreting these newly discovered planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And for me, I won't go into the whole diatribe now about it, but for me, I have been getting back to the roots of these mythological figures, or gods, as it were. The reason why is because let's just talk about what an archetype is. An archetype for me is simply or I think for most of us, is simply a common experience that at some point 99% of us will experience. So for instance, love, right? Love, most of us, not everybody, but most of us, before we check out of this life, we're going to have a few relationships that are very meaningful. And so we will partake in that common experience of relationship and love. Venus is the symbol that presides over that entire spectrum of experiences, loving somebody, getting loved by somebody, maybe getting dumped by somebody, wanting somebody, the desire, everything under the sun that has to do with love or desire is usually within the realm of the Venusian archetype, for instance. But with these outer planets, because they were newly discovered, we had to invent in the modern time ways to almost assign them archetypes. What are these planets supposed to do in astrology? What do they mean, right? Well, for me, the simplest way to think about what these planets could mean, since they weren't coming to us from the ancient world already like set up with the archetype, was just to say, okay, I surrender to the notion that some higher force of divinity wanted us to choose these particular names, and the names are coming from the ancient world and have already have archetypal associations connected to them, or archetypal lessons. So Uranus, what is Uranus's archetypal lesson? Well, one lesson for sure I think that could be symbolized by Uranus is that Uranus was the original god. He was the father of all of the other gods. He was the father of Saturn and Jupiter and Venus and everybody, I think. I'm not completely sure about who he wasn't the father of, but essentially it was Mother Gaia, right, the Earth, and then it was Father Sky, Uranus or Uranus. So, and then from there, that's where all of the other gods came from. So, one theme right off the bat that I think it's safe to associate with Uranus, besides just the normal change or sudden change that we all seem to gravitate towards and narrow down to, is potentially something very, very ancient. So, I imagine as the sun is filtering through Taurus, this Venusian realm, what is the sun doing as he is traveling through Taurus? Well, the sun is a symbol of knowledge, of divine and timeless knowledge and wisdom. The sun sees all. He presides over all. He is the center of everything. He is the center of life and light. So there's an incredible wisdom and knowledge that radiates out from the sun. And as he travels through Taurus, he is going to radiate the kind of knowledge that is Venusian. So Venusian knowledge, in my mind, is like the springtime ability to understand innately how to be attractive to the opposite sex, understand what you want in the opposite sex. So there's these it's very relatable. The sun has this knowledge about how to be charming, relatable, good with a relationship, a friend or a partner, something like that, right? The sun in Taurus has these natural, instinctive knowing about how to do all things artistic, aesthetic, graceful, relational, loving, attractiveness. All of those things come naturally to the sun in Taurus because the sun is traveling through a springtime sign. So I think the sun takes that springtime solar energy, and when you combine that with Uranus, you get, how was this done in an ancient way, or at least in our past, like when we were maybe younger. So, for instance, how did I used to attract a mate when I was 19, 18? Something a long time ago for me is like the ancient past, right? But also, how did people attract mates when we were, living in caves or whatever, in the Neanderthal days or whatever? How did we forage for food? This is Taurus we're talking about. How did we turn over the soil and plant seeds and things like this? These very ancient themes of how things were in the beginning, either in the beginning of our lives or in the beginning of the dawning of man or something like that. But there's this very going back to the very, very ancient past and understanding how did we relate in an ancient way. So this could be connecting to what the red pill community calls the biological imperative of both sexes, which is a really, really fascinating topic. And I won't go into it too much. But essentially, there is this theory that, both male and females have a particular biological imperative that drives some of the more conscious choice making that we have. So, for instance, this stereotype of men, liking certain things in a woman, or the stereotype of a woman liking certain things in a man, that is somehow below, the everyday world of conscious choice. That theory that there is something, at the root level, that is instinctual or biological. It's interesting. I'm watching my little baby girl, Amelia. I'm watching her basically run on instinct, right? I mean, there's a little bit of personality coming through there. She's about 6 weeks old now, but a lot of it is instinct, right? It's just like cry, you know, cry if you're not held, cry if you're not fed, cry if you're uncomfortable. That's her, executive instinct at this point that is really there to help her survive since she doesn't have a lot of ability, at that young age, right? So there's this theory that there are things that we do that are biological, we pick up on biological cues, we behave in biological ways that are just hardwired into us. So I think one thing that is very interesting is, let's take this notion of Uranus usually being about things that are kind of outside the box or unique or revolutionary, and pair it with this idea that he was the pretty much the original god, or the father of all gods. So could there be, this remembrance, Venus in the moon sign, providing resources to this conjunction in Taurus between the sun and Uranus? Could there be tying all this stuff together, like this remembrance of like, oh yeah, I used to do this. That used to be like my game. This is what I used to say. Or these are the types of people that I used to like, and that's getting back to the root or the originality of it. Or, hey, we should go outside and forage for mushrooms in the forest now that it's springtime. That's what our ancestors did. Let's get back to something a little bit ancient, so it doesn't have to be about romance, but it could be, so just play with those notions, I guess, and you might see ways in which we may be getting connected to our ancient past in terms of how we're creative, how we procreate, how we attract, what we are attracted to, either just within our own lives, or maybe even deeper than that, going back to primordial times. Okay, well, that's what I have for today. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you guys got something great out of this. And leave me a comment in the comment section if anything resonates. I always love hearing your comments. Okay, I'll be back again on Wednesday, and we will take a look at some more astrology. So have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.